Howdy, folks. Welcome to Redneck Gone Green. I'm David Cobb. I am the redneck. You bet I've gone green, and I'm trying to get you to do it too. And a reminder here on Redneck Gone Green, when we say green, we don't mean merely environmentalism. We're talking about deep ecology. And whether you come at that from a recognition that we are all interconnected as a result of your approach to Western science, or you come at it from an eco-spiritual indigenous worldview, or like me, you say those are both completely valid ways of understanding the world. The point is, we are in fact all interconnected in this web of life. Whatever we do to this web, we are ultimately doing it to ourselves, and we have to be clear, unequivocal, and courageous enough to acknowledge that the political economy known as capitalism is literally destroying the planet that we depend upon for life itself. And with that cheery note, I'm going to bring in my co-host Shane Knight. Shane, how you doing, brother?
Dave,
Hey, there you go.
wait, you hear me?
Now I can.
Okay, yeah. I'm doing good, man. It's just another Monday. It's a little gloomy today. Had a rough weekend. Smashed my foot open, but throw a band-aid on it and keep going, right?
Yeah, hey man, we can't stop, won't stop, as the kids say. You
There
know,
we go.
I want to make sure, I know that some of y'all have tuned in very excited and eager to hear from Carsie Blanton. Carsie is not able to join us, but never fear, we will get her rescheduled. But I do want to let y'all know what we're going to do is take a look at the movement tracker and administration tracker. But before we do, like we always do, Shane, I would just want to check in a little bit about. There's been a lot going on this week, and starting with Cory Booker's pointless showboating.
Oh
Uh,
my God.
I'm curious how you experienced that.
Well, I'll give the man kudos for doing what he did, standing for as long as he did and keeping, I guess, a lot of people occupied. There were a lot of people I saw like tuned into the whole live stream. Uh, but at the same time, why the fuck not do it when there's legislation on the floor or something that would matter? It did seem like a big, pointless showboat exercise. And you look at the flip side of it, where what were you talking about? We had the legislation that was actually on the floor this past week that would have made an actual fucking difference if we'd have paid more attention to that.
Well, it's thank you for that point, because I do think I will always acknowledge, like, let's tell the whole truth, right? So the reality is that Cory Booker did deliver a 25-hour speech, but it's not as if people did not already know that what Trump was doing is bad. But what we did see is that there was, as you pointed out, there was no legislation on the floor, no nomination on the floor, no hearing. There was literally nothing going on. So question that I want to lift up a couple of questions that I've been seeing on social media. Here's one. Hey, Senator Booker, why confirm another Trump nominee right after your speech? Here's another one. Why did you miss your committee's antitrust hearing on big tech? Why didn't you mention Gaza? Mahmoud, uh, Mahmoud Kamil will be tried in your home state, yet he was not mentioned in your speech. How can you justify voting with Trump Republicans and the establishment to spend billions in weapons to Israel just days after your speech? So my point, Shane, is I think that we really need to be clear about what we are seeing. There, the leadership of the Democratic Party are supporters of empire and capitalism. What they don't like is Trump's horrific version of it. They want the kinder, gentler neoliberalism as opposed to the ugly, brutal, in your face of Donald Trump. Neither one of those are bad.
No, no, they're not. I want to back this up for a second, because for me, you just said something that was key. The whole, like, I forget who it was that said it, but the idea of Trump's vision for the world. I argue that they don't really have one. I look at Trump right now, and he's like pulled in three different directions. You've got the Bannon direction that he's trying to pull it in. You've got the Musk direction, and then you've got the Republicans downstream direction. Um, so if there's no real clear vision of what he wants as far as like what we're all calling an authoritarian regime, dictatorship of sorts, they seem to also be gloating about all of this, which is mind blowing. I'm curious to what your thoughts are on like their vision. What the fuck is their vision? Like what are they?
Listen,
They don't
I'll
seem to
be
have an end goal.
I'll cut right to it. Donald Trump is a grifter. There is no doubt about that. Donald Trump is an oligarch. No doubt about that. A grifting oligarch wants empire to continue with chaos.
Mm.
Compare that to the neoliberal Democrats who want empire, but want it to be done orderly and with the niceties of the quote rule of law. That's why that's the neoliberal Democratic Party leadership. But I also want to circle back, Shane, to your very astute observation that not all Democrats are neoliberals. I want to lift up, honor, and acknowledge Representatives Pramila Jayapal from Washington State and Rashida Tlaib from Michigan, who introduced legislation to block nearly $4 billion in proposed weapon sales to Israel after Israel unilaterally ended a ceasefire agreement in Gaza. So we have to recognize that we are dealing with a complexity about how the world is operating. And I'll take this moment to step back and share with the viewers, listeners, and readers of Redneck Gone Green. And it goes like this. Here's what's really happening, y'all. Big picture globally, a ecological collapse that's not coming, it's begun already and accelerating. That alone is an existential crisis and threat. But wait, there's more, because we're also in an economic crisis that is being precipitated by automation, robotics, technology, artificial intelligence. Because you see, even if there was some magical fix to the ecological crisis, which I do not see, but even if there was, capitalism as we understand it is in crisis. A crisis that began with the eroding of an industrial base as capitalism morphed into financialization and is now morphing into what Yanis Varoufakis calls techno-feudalism. In other words, capitalism operates by allowing the capitalist, the owner of the means of production, to extract the surplus value of the labor of the worker. And it cannot continue because automation, robotics are changing the very nature of how reproduction and capital operates. And so, needing fewer and fewer workers, there is an inability to extract the surplus value of the labor of worker. That's why austerity is intensifying. So you put those together and we see a political crisis emerging, Shane. And that political crisis is that whether it's a Democrat or a Republican office, this system is in a free fall. It's melting down. The neoliberal consensus is fading. The center cannot hold. I genuinely and sincerely believe that in the next 10 years, we're going to be moving in either in some direction of eco-socialism or continue an explicit global fascist meltdown. There really is no alternative. That's how I see it.
I totally agree, and I'm glad you brought up Yanis Varoufakis and his concept. Well, it's not really his concept, but him defining what we're looking at today as techno-feudalism. Because at the same time, like the rise of or the shift from financialization into the whole tech industry, you look at the landscape and what I see coming down the pike, and I don't know if Trump supporters realize this or not, but the whole idea of quote unquote bringing back industry to the United States, who the fuck do you think they're going to get to do the labor? It ain't going to be you. It's going to be Elon Musk's robot army. doing it, and he's going to have a contract and he's going to sell robots to every other corporation and be mandated by the state. They've really, and when you said grifter, Trump is not the only grifter. Musk is also a grifter. They're all. We're all being scammed, and I'm grateful to see though that more and more people are waking up to that idea and coming to that realization on their own. We've had people come on the show, and they were Trump supporters, and they're acknowledging, oh wow, this guy is really not what he said he is. He's not doing what he said he is, or said that he would do. And now we're at a loss. And I agree with you that we're either going to end up with some sense of eco-socialism down the line, or we are going to slip completely into fascist regime.
Yeah, it's I wish that I did not see with such clarity exactly what is coming, but that's what I see coming. You know, the good news is though, our good friends over at the Democracy Collaborative have created this movement tracker and the Trump tracker. So Shane, why don't you hit that? And what we'll do is allow our good friend Mel Figueroa, who we heard from as a live guest next week. And folks, if you're watching live, we want to continue, keep those comments and questions coming in the chat. What Shane and I are going to do is play a segment from Mel Figueroa. And at each point in this segment, we're going to stop it and then chop it up a little bit and hopefully include your comments and questions into it. Shane, let's hit it.
Here we go. Thank you, Mel.
Welcome to this week's Tracking the Crisis, the Democracy Collaborative's weekly news roundup of Trump administration actions and movement responses. This week's top story is the global trade war, precipitated by Trump's announcement of sweeping tariffs on Wednesday, April 2nd. Trump announced a 10% tariff across the board on all imports coming into the United States, plus additional reciprocal tariffs on many countries that trade with the U.S. and then some. The tariffs Trump imposed on Wednesday are the highest tariff levels the nation has seen for over a century. The tariffs affect trade around the world, and particularly penalize Asian and European countries, with some of the highest tariffs affecting Vietnam, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and Madagascar. The tariffs will affect Americans' daily lives in the form of higher prices, many of which include common grocery items and also common necessities. Experts say this is effectively a tax on the poorest households, and the average household is projected to pay about $3,800 more per year for everyday goods. The tariffs brought an immediate reaction and implosion in global markets. The Dow Jones plunged around 1,600 points the day after the tariffs were announced, and as of this recording is down more than 2,000 points since Wednesday. World markets also suffered, although Japan and the US have emerged as the biggest losers from the market volatility. Another big story.
So hold up there. I want to talk about these tariffs for a bit. Because I think it's really important that we all understand what we're getting at here. Folks, anybody can understand it. And I really appreciate our good friend, Professor Richard Wolff, who broke it down. A tax is nothing more than a tariff is nothing more than a tax imposed on imported goods. It's designed to protect domestic industries by making foreign products more expensive. Now, on its own, okay, whatever. Yes, prices are going to go up. But understand that the reason that the U.S. economy was already on the decline is because there has been virtually no investment in manufacturing, because capitalism in what I would call late stage, as it begins its end stage, began a level of financialization where profits are being derived more from speculation and debt rather than actual production. So that shift led to a level of stagnation in wages, a decline in middle-class jobs, and a growing wealth gap, the likes of which we haven't seen in 100 years. The U.S. economy is suffering from a lack of investment in productive sectors, as well as an over-reliance on global financial markets. And again, I think it's worth saying, Shane, what we're talking about here on this show is that we support commerce, but we want worker-owned cooperatives, so workers are in charge of their day-to-day activity. So this nonsense of the trade war that Trump is plunging us into is a function of the financialization. And yes, the tariffs were imposed by Trump, and the policies of the neoliberals, both on the Democratic and Republican parties, set this up.
Oh, so basically what you're saying is there's a bunch of rich people playing fucking games with all of our money.
there's my Mississippi redneck cutting to the chase. Yes, sir. That's exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yeah. It's disgusting. And the whole, I want to go, she was mentioning that there were more, the Asian countries, East Asian countries that are being hit the hardest with these tariffs. Does that, in your opinion, how much does that have to do with the entire tech sector and how pissed off they are getting? Or is this just Trump trying to get vengeance on the tech sector and try to wrangle them into his grip?
You know, it's always hard. It's a great question, and it's always difficult to think what it is that the orange Cheeto is really up to, right? Part of what makes Donald Trump such a master manipulator is that he is constantly sowing chaos and crisis, and then so I don't know is the short answer to what it is that Donald Trump really thinks he's doing, but I can tell you this, that where we're headed and where this trade war is going to take us into a very dangerous place. And I also think that it looks like it's not really a tariff plan so much as a power grab under the cover of a financial crisis that he has created himself. So a major faction of capital is actually pushing back on him. And this is what I think is fascinating. I and you and me have very little ability to influence what it is that the imperial players are doing. But what we can do is recognize that no one is coming to save us, and we can reject the kind of nationalism that Trump is trying to engender and recognize that we're going to have to take care of each other.
Especially when you look at things like this information that Mel gave to us about the tariffs that they're imposing on Mexico and Canada, when you're looking at the prices of tomatoes, limes, groceries, and goddamn beer. Come on.
Now.
They're gonna try to raise the price of beer. I think you're gonna piss off the wrong group of people. But this is great. I love that she put all this together for us.
Let's go back. Let's now pick up again exactly where she left off, right there at the market crash. I just wanted to stop a little bit to have you and me make sure, and I do want to recommend in the comment section for those listening and or watching live, there's some great discussion going on there, and if folks have specific questions, drop them in the chat. So, for example, Patricia asked, democratize the enterprise, also municipalities. Thank you, Patricia. I could not have said it better myself.
Yeah, I agree. Municipalities too. And if they're not going to do it, we're going to have to do it ourselves. And I'm glad to see like all the groups of people that we've been speaking to lately that are all coming together and doing that for themselves. I forget where it was. I heard a story the other day about a group in, I think it was Washington State, that were putting together their own electrical grid that's essentially like off the grid. They're building their own in lieu of what these big conglomerate electric providers have been doing, is buying up the smaller ones. And on places like reservation lands where they've been cutting off power, and these small rural areas cutting off power randomly, quote unquote, save the grid, and instead they're just saving themselves money and fucking with people.
Yeah, so it's interesting, right? There is in fact, let's make it a point, Shane. We need to have somebody from one of the rural electric cooperatives come on and talk about what it looks like when, instead of generating electricity and extracting a profit off of it, it's just considered a public good and the energy is produced and distributed using a nonprofit model. And by the way, you can do that either regionally or at the municipal level.
Well, I would love to see that transition starting to take place a little bit more rapidly, especially considering, like, we look at what Mel sent over about the market. I don't know, like, I didn't lose $7 million on Friday, but I haven't looked at my 401k either out of a sense of fear and really just flat out disgust. But at the same time, there's going to be a lot of people that are quasi wealthy. They're going to be really upset about this, and I'm wondering, when are they going to come to play? I saw something from Jamie Dimon, Damon, however you fucking say his name, the
Yeah.
CEO of Chase, came
Yep.
out and said something about this is dangerous
Listen,
and
what is really interesting, Shane, is we are watching the titans of capital and the billionaire class are warring with each other about exactly what to do. And I think it is important to acknowledge that there is, in fact, roiling internal debate about how to manage the decline of the U.S. empire. Let's hit this market crash again.
Let's see. I'm going to bring it back to the beginning of the section there so we can let Mel walk us through it.
Yeah.
The tariffs brought an immediate reaction and implosion in global markets. The Dow Jones plunged around 1,600 points the day after the tariffs were announced, and as of this recording is down more than 2,000 points since Wednesday. World markets also suffered, although Japan and the US have emerged as the biggest losers from the market volatility. Another big story that has been developing over the last weeks are the international students, most of them pro-Palestine.
Okay. You want to go ahead and go through this too?
I do. We're going to listen to Mel walk us through them, but I'm going to actually pick up on what Jack said in the chat, which is let's focus on how we're going to take care of each other. Because with these student activists, I think that it is worth pointing out that the administration and local communities can and should be raising hell when these students are literally being kidnapped by the federal government. And we need to do more than post on Facebook. We need to raise hell with the administration of the various universities that are allowing this to happen. We need to build a movement that's strong enough to begin to de-arrest and protect our citizens the same way that it happened during the Wisconsin wide awakes at the turn of the century during the abolitionist movement. So I think that like pushing ourselves to imagine how we are able to protect ourselves and each other and the most vulnerable, those are the right questions.
Yeah, that was a good question. Thank you, Jack.
Activists who have been targeted for detention and deportation by ICE. Many of them are being held in violation of court orders in a notorious Louisiana detention facility known for human rights abuses. Secretary of State Marco Rubio announced this week that over 300 student visas have been revoked for various reasons, but mostly involvement in activism. As detained student Mahmoud Khalil, who was arrested for pro-Palestine activism, has pointed out, these arrests are part of a broader strategy from the Trump administration to suppress dissent, especially on college campuses. Around 60 colleges have been targeted for investigation by the Department of Justice and threatened with the freezing of federal funding for campus activism around Palestine and DEI issues. Some campuses, notably Columbia University and Harvard, have capitulated to these intimidation tactics. Many experts warn about the implications of these new tactics generally on free speech in America. Also this week,
You want to touch on that for a second?
No, I mean, like the last one that we just listened to, I think is chilling and acknowledging the fact that Harvard and Columbia are capitulating, but I'm beginning to see a level of backbone in some of the public institutions across the country, Shane, and I'm tracking it. And as soon as good news appears, we're going to lift it up.
All right. Let's see what we got going on with the healthcare workers.
10,000 public health workers have been fired in what has been described as a bloodbath at the FDA, CDC, and National Institutes for Health. These layoffs and cuts impact the government's capacity to regulate food safety, respond to disease outbreaks, manage care for elders and disabled, and many more services that protect the American people from sickness and harm. These layoffs come at a tough time as outbreaks of measles, dengue, whooping cough, and tuberculosis are spreading throughout the nation. Over $3 billion in public health contracting has also been canceled, which will affect communities' ability to respond at the point of care during these outbreaks. We are also tracking developments in social movements and resistance to the Trump-Musk agenda throughout the nation. In response to the crackdowns on student activism, many campus communities are organizing and fighting back in defiance of their school administration's appeasement of Trump. Columbia students and faculty have been walking out on protests all week, including some students who chained themselves to the school gate to advocate for Mahmoud Khalil's release and for a free Palestine. Faculty and unions at other universities, such as Rutgers, are trying to organize together in order to resist White House intimidation, which has already eroded the integrity of some Ivy League schools. Under the mainstream media's radar, but also very important to note, is that the annual Trans Day of Visibility, which is March 31st every year, took on a very serious note this year due to the Trump administration's persecution and attack on transgender rights. Demonstrations across the country last weekend brought transgender communities and allies together as they fight to be seen, heard, and celebrated in the face of Trump administration's attempts to erase transgender history and deny vital health care and civil rights for transgender people. Finally,
So
we
hold
would
that,
be
because I do
remiss
want to take this moment to lift up, honor, acknowledge the LGBTQI community in general, and especially transgendered people, because it was trans people who were at the front lines of the Stonewall riot and protest. There are many that try to disappear them from that history and now try to turn it into nothing more than a parade. But the reality is that it was resistance, vocal, loud, unequivocal resistance that has always been part of movements for social change. You know, Shane, one of the things that I remind people is if you claim that you want social change, that you want to be a catalyst for social change, that means you've got to be willing to court a certain amount of disruption, because otherwise the pattern continues. There is a moment of disruption that is required in order to begin to make a change. And the most vulnerable in this first wave of the, or one of the first waves of the attack on the Trump administration has been against trans people, and trans people have been defying the Trump administration. They have been loud, they have been vocal, and they have been fabulous. And I just want to really lift them up, appreciate them, and we need to get their back.
I agree wholeheartedly. Being here in New York City and seeing the gathering that's been persistent over the last several weeks, especially around Stonewall and the AIDS memorial over there. There was a group that marched from the AIDS memorial to the Tesla protest, and both of those groups joined together. And it was a lovely thing to see, because I don't think people realize that when you participate in one of these events, you're going to come across people who have similar ideas, but also different ideas. And it's like lighting a candle and passing the flame from one to the other. And then that starts to grow. And it's a magical thing. And I love the trans community, specifically for their strength and their courage. We all have a lot to learn from that. And I'm glad we're lifting them up.
And I'll just end with one of the phrases that that community will often use, if you listen for it, is Stonewall was a riot. And of course, it's like, on the one hand, picking up on the, hey, it's fun, it's a riot. And on another hand, referring very much to the 1969 Stonewall uprising in New York City that really marked a pivotal moment in LGBTQ plus history. Literally, I think it's fair to say that that sparked the modern day gay rights movement, and it inspired activism and social change work that we're still benefiting from today. So again, it's great to be like you and I chopping it up and having this conversation. and our viewers and listeners participating in the comments. We need to continue to do that. And we need to learn a lesson from Stonewall and be disruptive.
I agree. All right, you want to keep going with
Yeah, let's
the
keep going, man. I'm
Super
loving
people.
this.
Finally, we would be remiss if we
Mm.
didn't mention the massive protests that took place last Saturday across the United States. The Hands Off National Day of Action brought an estimated 5 million people or more into the streets at over 1,400 events organized around the country, bringing thousands of people to protests not just in the usual places like New York and San Francisco, but also to deep red strongholds like Boise, Idaho, Salt Lake City, Utah, Wyoming, and more. That's it for this week's Tracking the Crisis summary. There's a whole lot more to read about in our weekly email dispatch. Go to trackingthecrisis.org to subscribe to our digest, which goes to your email every Friday. Thanks, and back to you, David and Shane.
Thank you, Mel Figueroa. What a great job. So looky here, Shane, I do want to take a moment to lift up. I was inspired by seeing so many people go out into the streets, and I would never say that protest and demonstrating is not an effective tactic, but it can't be just the only tactic that you use. I also want to say we have to tell the whole truth. Most of those demands at Hands Off were solid. Hands off Medicaid, hands off Medicare, hands off Social Security, hands off our wallets, hands off our bodies, hands off personal data theft, hands off public lands, hand off veteran services. But wait a minute, stop. Hands off NATO? What the hell? I got to tell you, Shane, we need to be clear that although many people believe NATO to be some sort of peace-loving defense alliance, the opposite is true. During the past 30 years, NATO has seen an arc of violence stretching from Libya to Afghanistan. Villages are bombed, infrastructure is destroyed, countless are dead. The reality is that NATO and the inclusion of NATO in the hands-off list contradicts the basic agenda. And why was that done? Because Indivisible is a Democratic Party front group. And this is why it's important for those of us on the real left to say, yes, we will agree with you on this domestic agenda against Trump, but we're not satisfied with following the lead and instruction of the Democratic Party, who just want to sheepdog us back in to making capitalism and empire more orderly and kinder and gentler, even as they destroy our planet. We need to demand health care as a fundamental human right. We need to demand housing as a fundamental human right. We need to demand the dismantling of the World Trade Organization, the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, and we need a new movement that goes beyond empire and managing empire and radical democracy from the bottom up.
I totally agree. And it's going to start, well, I think that one of the largest places that we're going to see a large foothold for this type of change is going to come from the development of worker co-ops, putting the power back into the hands of labor, making sure that workers have rights. I can't tell you the number of times that I have explained to people the similarity between lord and serf and employer and employee, and that they had never heard that correlation. And when they
Shane,
do,
I want to stop you as a lawyer and say, do you know what we study and what the doctrine is called in law? Master-servant relationships.
wow,
That's
really?
literally what we study. Master-servant relationships whenever you begin the introduction of understanding employment law.
Is that like middle management versus janitorial department or what?
Yeah, I think you got it. I think you got
Yeah.
it. Look here, Shane. This has been a fantastic kind of pickup and shift. I am so disappointed that we did not get to have Carsie Blanton join us, but we will be bringing Carsie back. I also want to lift up and encourage folks to know that next week we're going to be bringing forward political cartoonist Ted Rall. If you don't know Ted's work, make sure that you get involved on our Substack. I will, as always, write an essay on Ted Rall and his work, and remind you that you're watching, listening us, whether it's live or on video, on the Democracy at Work platform. Shane, I understand y'all just went over 500,000 subscribers on this platform.
We did a couple of weeks ago, and it's growing faster than it was before. Um, it's a very exciting time for us, but also a very busy time for us. We've also, in lieu of garnering the number of subscribers that we just did, we're bringing new shows. Really, we've got 3 new podcasts coming to the Democracy at Work platform. We just joined forces with Lee Camp. Lee
Hold
Camp's
on,
doing
hold
his
on. Lee
show.
Camp's my buddy. I can't let you just like go through that. So I do want to, folks, Democracy at Work is fast becoming the people's platform for news, information, and analysis. There's something really important happening here. I'm honored and proud, Shane, that you and I get to be a part of it. But you just pointed out that y'all are adding new programs at Democracy at Work. So tell us a little bit about who Lee Camp is and what that's about.
Well, for those of you who don't know Lee Camp, he's a comedian and probably one of the most oppressed, I suppose, across the internet comedians that's out there. I would liken, and other folks have likened him to like George Carlin-esque. He's been out in the forefront for years, bringing politics and comedy together, but also very informative as well as entertaining at the same time. And he had his show on RT for, I think it was about 8 years. And we've had him on Economic Update with Richard Wolff before, and Rick's been on his show. So we've known Lee for a while, and his partner Eleanor. They're doing a lot of great work. And a conversation that Rick had with Lee several weeks ago, Lee has been, I guess, like they're sort of not really putting his program in the algorithmic system that pushes content out. And we all know that's crazy and how that works. But at the same time, Lee asked if we could start collaborating together. And one of the hopes is, yes, I want to see more collaboration on the far left, which is where we are mostly.
I'm a proud and unapologetic leftist, and one of these days we're going to have do a whole show on what exactly that means.
I can't wait for that because a lot of people don't understand it. But what we're trying to do is, like you said, David, we want to have a lot of organizations have tried this in the past, but they all seem to have become overtaken by the capitalistic nature of the beast. And that's why one of the things that we do at Democracy at Work on our YouTube channels, we don't monetize our videos. All of our content, all of our work is strictly reader supported, viewer supported, audience supported, just like Redneck Gone Green is. And a lot of the other organizations that we're partnering with, like we're doing a new show with RJ Escal called All for All. He is also, we're all sort of depending on one another at this point. It's magical to see because the more that we start to build out, the more people want to get involved.
And so you've got a couple of other programs, I think, that are coming online. Can you talk about any of those, Shane?
Well, aside from Redneck Gone Green, which we started several months ago, we've got All for All coming out. We've got Lee Camp's show that's coming on. We've been doing a show with Professor Shahram Azar from Bucknell University, who is the associate economics professor there. His show, The Dialectic at Work, we're going to be ramping that up. We also have Dr. Harriet Fraud, who's a mental health counselor here in New York City. She has her own podcast. And we've got, I think, 1 or 2 more. I know one that's in the works, but I can't really talk about it yet because we hadn't really nailed down all the details and gotten everybody roped into it yet. But it's very exciting, and I couldn't be prouder of what we've been able to accomplish and the direction that we seem to be going in too. It's a lot of work, but man, it's an exciting time. And what we just started with the whole Friends of Democracy at Work, with the goal of matching people with needs that they have with organizations that are creating or facilitating those needs, which I mentioned several weeks ago, and Lee is definitely a part of that as well. So we're super excited.
Well, I am too. And I can't tell you how proud I am to be playing some small role in helping to put news, information, and analysis that's not corporately filtered, it's not corporately supported, and we are resisting monetizing this. So,
Yeah.
again, remember, folks, we do not charge anything for any of the content here at Redneck Gone Green, not our Substack, not our audio that you can get on any of the places where you get podcasts. We're going to continue to do that. However, we do invite you to join us on Substack. If you can support us, we'd appreciate it. But we're never going to make it a condition upon getting this information out. And Shane, we did not have Carsie Blanton on as a guest, but we do have a parting gift for the viewers and listeners of Redneck Gone Green. And as they say, let's have Carsie play us out.
Let's see if I can get that going here.
Nothing's more important than stopping fascism, because fascism will stop us all.
Well,
You come in at the top of my shit list, even though you look a little punk rock. You talk real loud, but you totally with less.